Welcome back. You're right on time. The world outside might still be chasing, scrolling, comparing. But here, you can slow down. This is Sleepless Investor, a quiet space for the stories that money can't shout, but time will always whisper. Today, we'll explore a story of conviction and a little bit of luck. Some of these people saw something the world couldn't. Others simply forgot what they had or did nothing at all, and that still changed everything. Back when Bitcoin was worth less than a penny, a handful of curious minds believed in it, and a few others, by accident or patience, became part of one of the greatest financial stories of our time. You have to imagine the world in those early years. No crypto influencers, no billion-dollar exchanges, just a few programmers, forum users, and dreamers sitting behind glowing computer screens, mining digital coins that couldn't even buy a cup of coffee. Back then, most people laughed. They said Bitcoin was fake money, that it would disappear like every other internet fad. Even tech experts dismissed it as an experiment destined to fail. But a few people, ordinary people, not bankers or Wall Street legends, looked past the noise. They believed that something invisible could still hold real value. They didn't have proof, only intuition. And the funny thing is, some didn't even believe at all. They just forgot to sell. They misplaced a wallet, or mined a few coins, then went on with their lives. Yet years later, when the world finally caught up, those forgotten moments became fortunes. These stories aren't just about vision or faith. Some held on because they believed in a revolution. Others simply forgot, misplaced, or ignored what they once mined for fun. But time rewarded them all the same. Because sometimes it's not just about foresight. It's about what happens when patience and coincidence meet opportunity. So wherever you are right now, on your couch, in your car, or working quietly toward your own dream, just pause. Because what you're about to hear will remind you that sometimes the biggest rewards don't go to the loudest, but to the calmest, to those who wait, to those who believe, and yes, sometimes even to those who simply forgot. Now, let's begin with the man who once bought Bitcoin out of curiosity, then forgot all about it, until years later when his old investment made him a millionaire. This is the story of Kristoffer Koch. In 2009, deep in the corners of the internet, a young Norwegian student named Kristoffer Koch stumbled upon something called Bitcoin. He wasn't a trader. He wasn't even chasing money. He was just writing his thesis on encryption, and Bitcoin happened to be part of it. Out of pure curiosity, he decided to buy some just to see what would happen. For about $27, he purchased 5,000 Bitcoins, barely enough to fill a hard drive. Then he forgot about it. For years, the world moved on. Bitcoin rose, crashed, rose again. But to Kristoffer, it was nothing more than a distant memory on an old laptop. Until one ordinary afternoon in 2013, when news about Bitcoin's rising price flashed across his screen. Something clicked. He remembered. He rushed to find that old password buried somewhere in his files. And when he finally unlocked it, his forgotten experiment had turned into a fortune worth over $800,000. What started as curiosity had quietly transformed into wealth. Without effort, without planning, just time. Kristoffer didn't predict the future. He didn't trade, gamble, or strategize. He simply forgot, And somehow that forgetfulness became one of the luckiest financial accidents in history. But maybe that's the beauty of time. It doesn't always reward the smartest or the loudest. Sometimes it just rewards those who happen to be there, at the right place, at the right moment, with just enough patience, even if by accident. And while Kristoffer's fortune was born out of forgetfulness, the next story belongs to someone very different. Someone who didn't stumble into wealth, but waited for it. A man who held on, not by accident, but by faith. This is the story of Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith isn't a celebrity. He's not a programmer or a Wall Street genius. He's just an ordinary man who made an extraordinary decision to believe when no one else did. In 2010, while most people were laughing at Bitcoin, he quietly invested about $3,000 when each coin cost less than 10 cents. No one understood why. There were no tutorials, no exchanges, no hype. Only a handful of online forums filled with strange math and even stranger hope. For years, nothing happened. Friends forgot about it. The world moved on. But he didn't. He held on through crashes, ridicule, and silence, because somewhere deep down he felt that something invisible was about to become inevitable. Then 2017 came. Bitcoin hit $10,000. His few $1,000s had turned into more than $25 million. He didn't post about it. He didn't brag. He simply cashed out enough to retire, moved to a quiet tropical island, and still kept part of his Bitcoin, a reminder of what patience can do when time finally catches up. Some call it luck. Others call it faith. But maybe it was both. Because sometimes the hardest thing in the world is to do nothing and still believe. And while Mr. Smith's story is one of conviction, the next belongs to two men who didn't just believe in Bitcoin. They bet their entire fortune on it. This is the story of the Winklevoss twins. Before Bitcoin, they were already famous for a feud. Cameron and Tyler Winklevoss, the twins who once battled Mark Zuckerberg over the creation of Facebook. When they finally settled that lawsuit, they walked away with $65 million. And a choice. Most people would have built mansions, bought yachts, or disappeared into comfort. But not them. In 2012, when Bitcoin was still just a strange whisper among programmers, the twins decided to take a gamble. They invested roughly $11 million, buying around 120,000 Bitcoins, when each coin was worth about $10. Friends called them crazy. Reporters mocked them. They were told it was another internet bubble waiting to burst. But they didn't care. They saw something no one else did. A revolution hiding in plain sight. Years passed. Bitcoin rose, crashed, then rose again. Through every wave, the twins held on. Patient, deliberate, unshaken. And when the world finally turned its eyes toward Bitcoin, the Winklevoss twins had already become billionaires. They didn't stop there. They founded Gemini, a regulated crypto exchange built to make Bitcoin safer for everyone. They didn't just profit from the system, they helped shape it. To this day, they remain two of the loudest voices in crypto. Not just investors, but believers. Men who turned skepticism into legacy. But not everyone's story was made of bold vision and clear strategy. Some were quieter, more personal, and one of them belonged to a man who was there from the very beginning, the first person in history to ever receive Bitcoin. This is the story of Hal Finney. Before the fame, before the headlines, before the word crypto even existed, there was Hal Finney, a quiet genius, a programmer who spent his nights tinkering with ideas that most people would have laughed off as science fiction. In 2009, when Bitcoin was nothing more than lines of code shared among a few curious minds, Hal downloaded the software just to see if it worked. He wasn't chasing wealth. He wasn't trying to start a revolution. He was just curious, and that simple curiosity changed everything. One day, an unknown user named Satoshi Nakamoto sent him a message. They talked, exchanged ideas, and tested this strange new form of money. Then, on January 12, 2009, Hal received the first ever Bitcoin transaction to 10 BTC. It had no price, no market, no value, just potential. He began mining Bitcoin from his computer, back when you could do it with nothing but a regular laptop. He saw it as a fascinating experiment, a glimpse into the future of freedom and technology. But Hal's story wasn't about riches. Even as Bitcoin's value began to rise, he was diagnosed with ALS, a disease that slowly paralyzed him. From his wheelchair, he kept typing, tweeting, and sharing ideas about Bitcoin's promise. He watched the dream he helped spark grow into something far bigger than he could have imagined. When Hal Finney passed away in 2014, the Bitcoin community mourned not just a man, but a pioneer, a reminder that behind every great revolution, there are people who build quietly, believe humbly, and never stop dreaming. He never sold his Bitcoin. He never bragged. He simply believed. And in doing so, he became part of digital immortality. But while Hal's story ended with peace and legacy, another man's story would end with regret, a single mistake that would haunt him forever. This is the story of James Howells. James Howells wasn't a visionary or a Wall Street genius. He was just an IT engineer from Wales, curious, tech-savvy, and a little ahead of his time. Back in 2009, he mined Bitcoin on his personal laptop, simply because he could. No one cared much about Bitcoin back then. It was a hobby, an experiment. James mined about 7,500 coins and saved the data on a hard drive. Then life moved on. Years later, while cleaning out his desk, he threw that old hard drive away, the same one that held what would one day be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. At first, it didn't matter. Bitcoin was still a strange thing no one used. But when the price began to rise, James realized what he had lost. He searched everywhere. The attic, old boxes, cables, drawers. And then it hit him. That drive was gone, buried in a landfill somewhere in Newport. For over a decade, he's tried to dig it back. He's offered his city millions in reward, hired experts, proposed scanning the landfill with AI and drones. But every time the answer is the same: no. Some called him unlucky. Others said careless. But the truth sits somewhere in between, because James didn't lose his Bitcoin out of greed. He lost it out of normalcy. He just didn't know what he had. And maybe that's what makes his story hit harder than any other. It's not about risk or faith or timing. It's about how easily we overlook the things that could change our lives until it's too late. James Howells became a quiet legend in crypto history, not for what he gained, but for what he lost, because sometimes the smallest mistakes echo the loudest. When you look at all these stories side by side, you start to see something deeper than money. Some people believed, some got lucky, some simply forgot, but in the end, all of them were touched by the same thing, time. Time turned their experiments into fortunes, their mistakes into legends, their curiosity into history. Bitcoin wasn't just a currency, it was a mirror, a reflection of human nature itself, our greed, our patience, our hope, and the strange way we value things only after the world tells us they matter. For every Kristoffer who held, there's a James who lost. For every Hal who believed, there's someone who mined and moved on. And maybe that's the quiet truth behind it all, that in life, just like in Bitcoin, value is often invisible until it's too late. The believers, the forgetters, the dreamers, the unlucky, they all remind us of one thing, that every click, every choice, every small decision can ripple through time in ways we'll never see coming. So as you close this story, remember, not everything valuable looks valuable right now. Sometimes the world just hasn't caught up yet. This is the quiet lesson of Bitcoin. Not just about the money made, but about the time it took to make it. Until next time, stay curious, stay patient, and never stop watching what time can do.